Genesis 14 is where we're at, guys. Genesis 14. So we just finished Genesis 13. It was that great story. Remember Abram and Lot? They both got so successful. What had to happen? Had to part ways, man. It's like we're both so successful. Tony, we can't keep sharing a driveway. We're both getting so successful. That's right. You go left, I'll go right. Oh, man, hey, he's across the street too. There you go. It's just, they part ways. They go and they say, hey, Abram very peacefully says, you pick a direction. You go one way, I'll go the other. I don't care. Why does Abram say that? Why does Abram say, you pick whichever way you want to go, Lot?
He's trusting in God. He's gracious for what God's done for him and through him, and he knows God's going to take care of him whatever he does.
No matter what happens, he knows God will take care of him. That's exactly right. This is a great perspective. To go back to Sergio, that's what Sergio was telling Smokey. Sergio's fine, right? Not because Sergio is some, strong man, although he's a strong guy. Why is Sergio saying he's fine? He knows God's with him wherever he goes. It doesn't matter. God walks with him, and that's what Abram believes. And Abram is a story of ups and downs, right? Valleys, peaks, troughs. That's his life. And he's learning some lessons. God is getting him ready for a big moment. And that moment is coming in a few chapters. And it's going to be the moment where the fullness of his faith is going to be tested. So in 13, you see that he is a man of peace. And he trusts God. And he says, I do not fear injustice, Lot, whatever you want to do. And what does Lot do? Remember what he does? How does he evaluate which direction he's going? Van, do you remember how he evaluated?
His eyes.
His eyes. He looks and he calculates and he studies and says, that looks like the richest land. I'm gonna get one over on my uncle. I'm going to go ahead and get the best land. No humility in Lot. All Lot cares about is what? Himself. His future success. He goes, Unc, I'm going to go this way. He says, go that way. And he heads that way. And you see this peaceful man, Abram. That's one of the things we talked about. Great leaders, strong men are men of peace. That it's really only a virtue when you have the capacity to be a man of war. If you're a man of peace, but you don't have the capacity of war, that's just a default setting. That's not a virtue. Right? For Abram, we're going to see in chapter 14, he's not just a man of peace. You know what else he is? He's a man of strength. He's a man of war. There's a switch that when it flips, Abraham is in the game and he's a fighter. And it's a great example of just this balance of what a strong leader, a strong man ought to be. Both one side, a heart of compassion, a heart of humility, a heart of trusting God, and a heart of peace. And another side, when you see injustice and wrong, you're willing to put everything on the line and go. Now, he's going to go to this war here in just a minute to go rescue Lot, we're going to see. What is something Abram knows? What has God told Abram that Abram is taken to the bank that he knows is a fact? He's going to go to war. He's going to go fight against these kings to rescue his nephew. What does Abram know 100% is true?
That's promise.
What's that?
That's promise.
Which means what about him?
We've got to be a survivor.
He can't die.
We know the end.
There's no way I can die. He gave me what promise did God give Abram? A seed. You can be a father of many nations someday, but you're going to have a seed. You're going to have a child. Right? You're going to have this child. Abram, he's holding on to this. As bizarre as it sounds to him, he's like, God told me I'm going to have a kid. That means I can't get hit by a bus. I can't go to a battlefield and die because then God cannot fulfill his promise. And God honors his promises. He knows that. He is holding so much onto the very trust and the word and the promises of God. That's one of the great lessons of Abram here, is that when God has told us something, you can take it to the bank. So you finish this at the end of 13:18. So Abram moved his tent, went to live near the oaks of Mamre at Hebron, where he built an altar to the Lord. And now Lot goes one way, Abram goes the other way. God comes in. He renews his promise to Abram just to strengthen him one more time. And at the end of that, Abram worships God. Now, all of a sudden, out of nowhere, this chapter just shows up. Scholars have had all kinds of a field day on this chapter. But out of nowhere, suddenly, look at this. In those days, now, go easy on me on the names here. They're ancient names. Okay. In those days, King Amraphel of Shinar, that would be modern day Iraq, it's Babylon. King Arioch of Elasar, King Chedorlaomer of Elam, King Tidal of Goim, waged war against King Bera of Sodom, King Bersha of Gomorrah, King Shinab of Admah, King Shemeber of Zeboim, as well as the king of Bela, that is Zoar. All of these came as allies to the Siddim Valley, that is the Dead Sea. They were, by the way, do you see that where it says that is? You see these parentheses? You see that in your Bible? These are little notes that, who wrote Genesis, by the way? Moses wrote Genesis. That's the traditional understanding of authorship. But he's writing about Abram. This is probably 600 years prior. So what Moses is doing is he's writing as best he can in this first-hand account of what's happening with Abraham. But what he's doing is he's having to add little geographical timestamps on here so that people go, oh, yeah, I know where that is. It's his way of trying to help his current audience understand the lay of the land here. Verse 4. They were subject to Chedorlaomer for 12 years. So you had all of these little cities that were like vassal cities to Chedorlaomer. And this guy was the big king. He was the ruler of this entire area. For 12 years, they paid tribute to him. And they're tired of it. Verse 4, for 12 years, but in the 13th year, they rebelled. In the 14th year, Chedorlaomer and the kings who were with him came and defeated the Rephaim and Ashtaroth Karnaim, the Zumim and Ham, the Ammonim and Shava Kiriathaim, and the Horites in the mountains of Seir, as far as El Paran by the wilderness. What's happening now is these kings, they're coming out against these city kings that are rebelling against him. They're saying, we're not going to pay the tribute to you anymore. And he says, really? And he's going to come in and he's going to take them over. It's a little bit like, it's like a little bit like what Hitler did in World War II. Remember? He starts off with Czechoslovakia, then he hits Poland, right? Then he hits, I don't remember the exact order, Belgium, Luxembourg. He just begins to take over all the little guys along the way, just eating them up along the way. But he's really making a move towards who? Where's he ultimately going? He's going to hit France, right? That's going to be the first major play he's going to have here. He's just eating his way up as he's getting to these guys that are rebelling. Verse 7, then they came back to invade En Mishpat, that is Kadesh, and they defeated the whole territory of the Amalekites, as well as the Amorites who lived in Hazazon Tamar. Verse 8, then the king of Sodom, the king of Gomorrah, the king of Admah, the king of Zeboim, the king of Bela, that is Zoar, went out and lined up for battle in the Siddim Valley against King Chedorlaomer of Elam, King Tidal of Goim, King Amraphel of Shinar, and King Arioch of Elasar. 4 kings against 5. Now the Siddim Valley contained many asphalt pits. These are like tar pits. They're natural. They're just out on the land. If you get in those, you're kind of stuck. They had a bunch of these. And as the kings of Sodom and Gomorrah fled, some fell into them, but the rest fled to the mountains. The 4 kings took all the goods of Sodom and Gomorrah and all their food and went on. They also took Abram's nephew Lot, took all of his possessions, for he was living in Sodom. Remember before, where was he living? Close to Sodom. What's happened to Sodom? What's happened to Lot?
Sodom.
Yeah, he's just getting sucked into the system, right? You just think, if I could just stay close by, I can just keep my distance. And sure enough, human nature takes over, and he's living in Sodom. And so look what happens. And they went on, verse 13. One of the survivors came and told Abram, the Hebrew, who lived near the oaks belonging to Mamre, the Amorite, the brother of Eshcol, and the brother of Aner. So he's got a couple guys that are kind of his allies. They were bound by a treaty with Abram. When Abram heard that his relative had been taken prisoner, he assembled his 318 trained men born in his household. And they went in pursuit as far as Dan. Now there's Dan. Dan doesn't exist till later, right? Till the end of the promised land, and the land is divided. So this is Moses adding a little note about where these guys were. Tell me about Abram real quick. He's got 318 trained men that were living in his household. Well, what do we know about Abram?
He's done well.
He's done very well. He's amassed an army of men, 318, that he provides for. He takes care of them. He pays them a salary. And if there's 318 men, what else are probably living in his household? Women and children. Abram has built up a nice following of people. Notice, by the way, there's no city of Abram. He has no interest in having his own town, his own city. He's not erecting his own monuments to himself whatsoever. So he takes these 318 guys, and look what he does. They went in pursuit as far as Dan, and he and his servants deployed against them by night. Why does he go by night? What do you think these soldiers are doing now that they've just worked the way through this entire region, taking over all of these other cities, defeating all of these kings? What do you think they're doing now?
Drinking and sleeping.
They are celebrating. Right? They're either sleeping, they're passed out, they're up partying, they're drinking, and Abram's smart. He knows if I stand a chance, yeah, God is with me, okay? But I got to do my part. I'm going to be smart with my strategy. What does he do? He goes by night and he divides his men. And he goes in. Look what happens. He pursues them and he defeats them. And he pursues them as far as Hobah to the north of Damascus. I mean, he goes way up there because he does not want these guys coming back. He brought back all the goods and also his relative Lot and his goods, as well as all of the women and the other people. Now, the laws of war were, if you win the war, guess what you get? You get all the spoils. Abram now has got it all. He's got all of Lot's stuff. He's got all of Sodom and Gomorrah's and those kings, all the resources, all the goods, all the people, all their servants. Abram now has access to all of this stuff. He has probably 10x'd his kingdom just in this one battle right here, if he wants it. If he wants it. Look what happens now. Out of nowhere now, verse 17. After Abram returned from defeating Chedorlaomer and the kings who were with him, the king of Sodom went out to meet him in the Shavah Valley. That is the king's valley. Okay, the king of Sodom goes out to meet him. What did the king of Sodom not go do?
Go fight. He did not go fight.
He did not go fight. If you remember, what do we know about Sodom? Well, if you go to chapter 13, verse 13, this is what we know about Sodom. Now the men of Sodom were evil, sinning immensely against the Lord. This entire city was all full of self-indulgence, whatever they could get for themselves. So if that's the entire city, what do you think that says about the king of that city? All this guy cares about, the king of Sodom, is what? Power, himself. What do I need to do to get back in the game? I'm not about to give my life for my people. I'm going to do whatever I can to make sure I don't die in this battle. And he preserves himself. And suddenly Abram comes out of nowhere. He defeats all of Sodom's enemies. And now you get Abram here. The king of Sodom went out to meet him in the Shavah Valley. But look what happens. Suddenly there's this 3-verse interruption. Verse 18. Melchizedek, which, by the way, his name means king of righteousness. Melchizedek, king of Salem, which is probably a precursor to Jerusalem. Right? He's the king of righteousness who is the king of what city? He's the what? The king of, what's Salem? Peace. The King of righteousness who rules the city of peace. He's the King of peace. Brought out bread and wine. He comes to Abram, and now he offers this hospitality, this refreshment of bread and wine. It says he was a priest to God Most High. So one thing we know immediately about Melchizedek is he wasn't just a king, he was also a priest. Now, there are several views about who this Melchizedek person is. You only get 3 verses about him right here, and that's it. You don't hear about him again for 1,000 years. And in Psalm 110 and verse 4, David quotes the psalm. And let me just show you the psalm, guys, just so you can kind of see it. If you want to go to Psalm 110, this is 1,000 years later, David quotes or talks about Melchizedek. Verse 4 of Psalm 110. David says, "The Lord has sworn an oath and will not take it back. You are a priest forever according to the pattern of Melchizedek." Out of nowhere, David mentions Melchizedek's name for the first time. It's bizarre. How is this one person that's mentioned by Moses in just a very short 3 verses, never mentioned again? 1,000 years later is mentioned. And then, you know when the next time Melchizedek's mentioned? 1,000 years later in the book of Hebrews, which we're going to look at here in a minute. So he gets 3 mentions in the Bible, and they're interspersed by a full millennium each. And look what happens here.
Walter,
Yeah.
is the bread and wine a foreshadowing?
Well, so this is where we're going to talk about typologies, right? You guys, some of you might have heard the term typology. A typology in the Bible is when you see what's called a type, and then there is a fulfillment, an ultimate fulfillment of what's called the antitype, right? So Jesus is the antitype of all the types. So for instance, when you look in the law, that you would take a lamb, right? Or you would take an animal that's 1 year old and unblemished, and you would shed its blood. That is the type. It's going to be a picture of something to come later. Jesus comes, and behold the what? The Lamb. Who does what? Who takes away the sins of the world. He's the antitype. So there are a number of these typologies in your Old Testament where you'll see somebody mentioned. David is a type. It's a lot of times why when you'll read about David, you'll see a lot of messianic connections between David and Jesus. It's because David is a type. Jesus is the antitype. Jesus comes and sits on the throne of David. He's the antitype. He is the fulfillment of the house and the promises of David. Remember 2 Samuel 7? The promise God gave to David that through you, I'm going to create a house, and it will last how long? It will last forever. How will you possibly have the house of David last forever? Doesn't matter how many descendants David has. They're all temporary. That means the only way the house of David could last forever is how?
Christ.
Who has to sit on the throne?
Christ.
Somebody that can live forever. Right? And Christ, who comes from the seed of David, from the lineage of David. He's the one that will sit on the throne of David. That's how types and antitypes work. So Spunky asks a good question. Hey, is the bread and the wine a type of the communion illusion of bread and body of Jesus in the New Testament? This is where sometimes people can go type crazy. You can begin looking for a lot of things in the Old Testament, and just because you see it in the New Testament does not mean it's a type and an antitype. Now, it doesn't mean it's not. How common were bread and wine, by the way, as forms of hospitality? Pretty common. It's bread and wine. So this is just part of the culture that you would offer somebody some refreshing, some hospitality. If I go across the street to Tony's house, or across the street, or next door to Van's house, he might offer me a glass of wine and I hope not a piece of bread, but maybe a piece of bread. If the month's tight, he might give me a piece of bread. Right? That's what they did back then. That was the means of providing sustenance for somebody. So I think the short answer, Spunky, after all of that is, I don't know. Sorry. It could be, though. There's a lot of allusions in this that are fascinating, but here's the deal. Melchizedek is a type. He is a type, and we know that because David, 1,000 years later, he's looking for somebody who can be both priest and king. And if you're a Levite, what could you never be?
Priest.
A Levite can only be a priest. A Levite can never be king. So in Israel, the way it was set up is priests and kings were completely separate. You could never be king if you were a Levite. But it says someday the Messiah, the one they're looking for, the promised one, he will be a priest and a king forever. How do you do that? Well, you have to do that by establishing a different line. A line that has no end. There is no temporality to the line. And so I think what happens is David, as he's writing the psalm, and he realizes the Messiah has to be both priest and king, he's going back and going, is there anyone that's ever been a priest and king? And I think David, knowing the scriptures, sees this text of Moses writing the account of Melchizedek entering into this battle after the battle with Abraham, who's a priest and a king. Melchizedek, we know his name is Canaanite. He's a Canaanite king. Look what he says here, by the way. He blesses him. First of all, he blesses Abraham. The man called by God with the promise that would bless the world, this king of Salem comes and he blesses Abraham. And he gives him bread and he gives him wine. And look what he says. Abram is blessed by God Most High. El Elyon, by God Most High, creator of heaven and earth. And blessed be God Most High, who has handed over your enemies to you. This guy, Melchizedek, this is incredible. He is a believer and a follower of the one true God. But he doesn't know his name. He doesn't know his name is Yahweh. There's no reason he would know his name is Yahweh. There was, in the early 1920s, there was an amazing discovery made, an archaeological discovery, and they unearthed an area of this part of the world, and they uncovered what were called the Ugaritic texts. And these Ugaritic texts go way back to the 12th century BC. And they begin to tell you all about the Canaanites. Thousands of fragments and documents were discovered. And it tells you all you want to know about the belief in the gods of the Canaanites. And what happens is these documents go all the way back to 2000 BC. All the way back to the time of Abraham. And you know what you find? The Canaanites, the Canaanite people in their earliest form, when they were around, they were monotheistic. What does that mean?
One God.
They believed in one true God. And they devolved over the centuries, because that's what religion does. They devolved into polytheism and animism and the worship of nature. But early on, they believed in a one true singular God. In fact, if you go back to the earliest religions of the world, you actually see a devolution from monotheism to polytheism. That's what you see. You go back to the ancient Native Americans in America. They believed in the Great Spirit that ruled over all the spirits. If you look at early Greece, their gods, they believed in a pantheon of gods, but they were what were called henotheists. A henotheist is one who believed that there was one supreme being over all other beings. That is a form of monotheism, henotheism, and then polytheism. So the farther back you go in time, the more pure monotheism becomes. Why do you think that is? Why would that make sense? Biblically, why would that make sense?
God put it in their hearts.
God put it in their hearts. When you go to the very beginnings of human history, you got the earliest iterations of truth before they began to be diluted and devolve into a multiplicity of gods and deities. So here you've got Melchizedek, who I personally believe, some say Melchizedek is a theophany, a kind of, or even maybe a Christophany. It's Jesus himself entering in. I don't take that view. Some do. I don't take that view. You can take that view. That's totally fine. I believe historically Melchizedek was a Canaanite king of an early city called Salem, which is a precursor to Jerusalem. And he was a king of righteousness who ruled the king of Salem, who worshiped a one true God, did not know his name was Yahweh, but he knows that this man Abram, he knows about him because Abram has a big name, and he comes to him and he acknowledges who Abram is and he blesses him because he believes the only way Abraham could have possibly won this battle is how? God. That is the only way. This man must know the one true God. There's no way 318 soldiers can come in and defeat all of these kings in battle. There's no way. And he comes and he does this brief blessing to Abram. Any questions or thoughts on that so far?
Well, you mentioned that theologians have a heyday with this chapter. I've heard others, some that believe this was an outside source for this chapter.
Yes, that's right. Chapter 14 is believed to be an accretion into the text. You're going deep now. You've done some good reading on this. Yes. It's a chapter that if you just look at Genesis, a lot of critical scholars think this section makes no sense. It was thrown in later into the text to try to create an account for a priest-king dynamic so that Christ could fulfill it. I don't take that view. The earliest manuscripts that we have in Genesis have this text in here. They don't like it because it just shows up out of nowhere. But that's how God is sometimes. Right? Here's Abraham, faithfully trusting God, wins this battle, and suddenly the king of Salem, a precursor to Jerusalem, who's a king of righteousness, comes and blesses him. And what does Abram do? Look what he does. Abram gave him a what? A tenth of everything. Not of all of his wealth. He gave him a tenth of the spoils. He gave him a tenth of all that he got in that battle. Just gave it to him as a gift. Because what does he recognize about Melchizedek? This is a brother. This is someone who knows God. He's trying to invest in people who know the true God. He wants to bless Melchizedek back. Now, some say he's tithing to him as if it's a divine tithe. But it's not even a tithe because it's not born out of his income. It was simply the spoils of war. He's simply giving him a tribute, right? And Melchizedek, what did he do for this? He did nothing. He didn't even go to battle. He just shows up after the battle's won, blesses Abraham, gives him some bread and wine. But there's something about Melchizedek and his knowledge of God, El Elyon. There's something about his knowledge of him that Abram says, I'm going to bless him back. And he gives him a tenth of the spoils. That's it. Now what's interesting is, go to Hebrews real quick. I want to kind of touch on this quickly, and then we'll pick up on it some more next week. Look what happens. So 1,000 years now after David, the author of Hebrews in chapter 5, go to Hebrews chapter 5, okay? Look what he says here in verse 9 and 10. The author says, after he was perfected, he became the source of eternal salvation for all who obeyed him, and he was declared by God a high priest according to the order of Melchizedek. Hebrews is now saying Christ is the fulfillment of the priestly line through Melchizedek, not through Levi. He's not a Levitical priest. What tribe is Jesus from? The tribe of Judah. He can't be a priest unless he's from a different order. And then you go down to 620. Look what he says in 620. The author says, Jesus has entered there on our behalf as a forerunner because he has become a high priest forever, according to the order of Melchizedek. And then in chapter 7, look at this. He gives you a commentary on Melchizedek. For this Melchizedek, the king of Salem, Priest of God Most High met Abraham and blessed him as he returned from the defeating of the kings. And Abraham gave him a tenth of everything. First, his name means King of Righteousness. Then also King of Salem, meaning King of Peace, without father, mother, or genealogy. Now, this is where people say this is why Melchizedek is a Christophany or it's Christ himself. It's because it says he has no father or no mother. I don't think that's what the text is saying. I think what he's doing is he's going back to Genesis. All of a sudden Melchizedek out of nowhere shows up. It doesn't say, and he came from so-and-so and so-and-so begat him and that he died. It doesn't say any of that. He just shows up as the King of Salem. I think what the author of Hebrews is doing is he's taking this figure that we have no mention of mother, no mention of father, no mention of death. And he says this is the perfect type to now say that Jesus is the antitype. He is the fulfillment of this priest and king. But he's the one that will last forever and forever. He will not be a temporal priest or king. Just like with David, he sat on the seat of David forever. Even though the promise to David was to Solomon, he said, someday your house, I'm going to give you a house that will last forever. See? Type, antitype, Christ. Same thing here. The Melchizedekian priesthood. He was a believer in the one true God, but he didn't know his name. He was a priest. And the New Testament says, that priestly line, that's the line that Jesus becomes a priest from. It's incredible. It's a bizarre theological twist on what has to happen in order for Jesus to both have the priestly and the kingly line. And the end of this section it says, verse 3, without father, mother, or genealogy, having neither beginning of days nor end of life, but resembling the Son of God. This is why I don't believe he's Jesus. Because why? He resembles the Son of God. What does your Bible say? In the likeness. If it was the Son of God, the New Testament has no problem saying, and this was Jesus. But it's not. This is someone who's in the likeness of Jesus. He's resembling the Son of God. Meaning, Melchizedek had to have been a what? A real historical person, a king, who is now used as a type of the ultimate antitype in Christ. See? So, let's go back to Genesis. And we'll wind down on this. Well, look what happens in now all of a sudden 21. Now we're done with Abraham. 3 verses. By the way, this is one of the reasons why I believe the Bible. The Bible does this unbelievable thing where it takes a thread and that thread ties all the way through. Sometimes with the most limited things that it says, and sometimes with things that it doesn't say. It takes the unmentioning of no lineage and builds the entire priesthood out of not mentioning the lineage of Melchizedek. And it said this is the lineage, the priestly lineage of Jesus. It's incredible how 1,000 and 2,000 years later we now have Jesus as the king priest. Then the king of Sodom says to Abram, "Oh, Abram, thank you so much for saving my life." Is that what he says? Thank you for saving my people. Oh, blessed be your God. He must be so powerful. How might I follow him? Is that what he says? No, he says, hey, how can I get back in the game? Give me the people. You take the possessions for yourself. You know why he says that? Because he knows that if he gives me the people back, what can he do? Rebuild. He can rebuild. I don't need the possessions. I'm just going to get robbed and defeated again. Give me the people. I will rebuild again. You keep all the possessions, Abram. Because he knew by the laws of war, all the spoils went to Abram. Verse 22, but Abram said to the king of Sodom, I have raised my hand in an oath to the Lord, God Most High, creator of heaven and earth, that I will not take a thread or sandal strap or anything that belongs to you. Why is that? What is it that Abram knows about Sodom, the king of Sodom? Dark. He's dark. It's an evil town. He wants nothing to do with this darkness. It's dirty money. I would take nothing except what the servants have eaten. But as for the share of the men who came with me, Aner, Eshcol, and Mamre, they can take their share. Abram is always looking out for others. Listen, I want them to be taken care of. I'm taking nothing from you. Because I don't want anyone to ever think that my success and my wealth came from your hand. You take everything back that you want. I'm just taking what I came with. I'm going to bless the people that helped me. That's all. And I'm out of here. See? He could have easily 10x'd his wealth. And do you think Abram could have come up with a justification for it? Yes. What's the obvious justification? I won. The winner takes the spoils. And he would have been perfectly within his just rights to do that. But Abram was willing to sacrifice and give up. That's what he has claimed to, so that he might not dishonor the name of the Lord. See who Abram's becoming? He is this man of peace, but he's also this man of strength, this man of war, but he's also a man, you can see the deep integrity inside of him. There's an integrity inside of him. Now, you think he's going to fail again? Yes, a couple times. It's coming. Because Abram is every one of us. Abram is you and Abram is me. And we all have those times of intense faithfulness, intense trust that God has got it. I'm trusting him all the way through. And then he fulfills his promises. He delivers. He comes through. And then all of a sudden, a month later, we are seemingly back where we started. Y'all ever been there? Back where we started again. I know you guys that hasn't happened to, but it happens to people out there sometimes. Did you know that? That sometimes people struggle again. But what's the purpose of the struggle? The purpose of the struggle is to strengthen his heart, his soul, and his character. Because like I already said, there's a day coming. And it's going to be the hardest day of Abram's life. And yet he's going to handle that day like a pro. Because he trusts God so deeply. He's watched God's faithfulness so deeply. The biggest advantage of us being older guys, of us being 50 plus, 60 plus, some of us 70 plus, the biggest advantage of that is we have a longer rearview mirror to look back at and go, man, God showed up every step of the way. Every fear, every tear, every cry I have ever had in the last 30, 40, 50 years, I'm still standing because of God.
Amen.
All right? That's Abram's life. And he's going to become this unbelievably powerful giant in the faith here in just a few more chapters.